This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. You know, every year spring football has come around since 2020, and every year I encourage people to watch it for a number of reasons. One, I think just getting guys more opportunity to keep their football career alive does enhance the pool of players that are in the NFL. I do think that there are players every year in these spring leagues that will end up on an NFL roster and make a difference in camp or maybe even in the regular season. All of those serious reasons are there to watch something like the UFL and why I always recommend it. But I think there's more that I get out of it than just scouting or rooting for players who I liked in camp but didn't make the team, but maybe they're on a UFL squad. I think there's something more than that I think that you get as a football fan, especially if you're a football fan who comes on this channel, hopefully every day, maybe sometimes twice a day, and likes to debate the issues when it comes to the Cleveland Browns and talk about football. If you're somebody who loves football enough to engage in football on this level, then you're somebody that I think that should check out the UFL. Now, I don't think you need to be a hardcore fan like me and watch every game that you can of the UFL. I understand it's not for everybody, but I think even a casual, viewing of the UFL will be something that benefits you. And this is why. So what I want to talk about today is reasons why you as a Browns fan, or maybe you're not a Browns fan, you're just an NFL fan who watches my channel, why you should watch the UFL this spring and while it's going on. Number one reason is that it's football, right? I think that's always the number one reason to watch more football, is that it's football, but it's football without any of the fences up. Like in the NFL game, they put up a lot of walls between what's actually going on and what you see as a consumer, right? They want you a certain distance back and they want you a certain distance away. And that's why the NFL will even perpetuate myths like, second half adjustments or things that players have come out and said don't really happen anymore. You'll see the league try to come back and be like, no, that thing happens, even though players have told you it doesn't happen, because they want you to see the idea of football that they want to present to you for obvious reasons. The NFL has taken over the United States as the number one sports for quite some time in this country. And they've done it by being very controlling about how they present their game. And for the general fan, they do that for a reason, to make the game a little bit less confusing. But for those of us who want to get more out of football, you can kind of see that stuff with spring football. I'll compare it like this, and shout out to my fellow nerdy people in the audience. And if you're not a nerdy person, ask your local nerdy person what I mean by this, and they will tell you. The UFL is like rooting your phone or jailbreaking your iPod or jailbreaking your PlayStation, or it's basically unlocking the base software that you come with, right, that everybody gets, in order to see what this thing is truly capable of, like what's working behind the scenes. It's root permissions, it's jailbroke football, it is football for the person that wants to see how it works, that wants to see how the sausage gets made. That's what it's for. And I think that's one of the best things about it. You're not left to a lot of narratives about things, how things happen. If a team calls a timeout and a conversation is had, it's not left up to interpretation to figure out what that coach said in that timeout. Right? A lot of times a coach will call a timeout and coincidentally there'll be a big play that happens after that timeout. And we just go, oh, well, you got to imagine that the coach had said something to them in that huddle. Well, in the UFL, you hear what the coach says in the huddle. You hear that conversation on both sides. You hear the play call. You hear the back and forth between the player, the quarterback, and the coach about the play call. You hear if a player's having a hard time getting the play call. If a player is frustrated and you see them storm off the field after a timeout and they're mad, you don't have to guess what that player is mad about. You hear it. You get that information. If a coach is yelling on the sideline at somebody, you hear it. You get that information. If a player is trying to rally the troops, or maybe he's just mad at his teammates, you hear that conversation. And the reason I think that access is important is because it eliminates the need to make assumptions, and assumptions that are based off of very little working information on how sidelines work, how timeout conversations work in a professional environment, because you get to hear it. The myths are gone. It's not up to conjecture. It's not up to what people think somebody should have said or could have said. It's about what is actually said. And that gives you a better idea of, when you see these same things happen in the NFL, of what is actually going on. So, you know, hey, this might not be something to overreact to. It could be a number of things. Or maybe this is something to react to, because you got to see a lot of these situations go down with full context and full audio in the UFL. Another area where this transparency is delicious for its fans is when it comes to officiating. See, 90% of the issue that we have with officiating is that it's not transparent. We don't understand why a foul was called. We don't understand why holding isn't called. In the NFL, you just have to deal with it. Right? I don't know why they're not calling holding on Myles Garrett. They're never going to address it. They're never going to talk about it. And if you complain about it, you're going to get fined $15,000. In the UFL, it's a little bit different. In the UFL, you hear the conversations that the referees are having about every penalty. Is that a personal foul? Are you sure? Where did you see it? Hey, let's check with replay. Did replay see it? And then the broadcast can ask the guy going over the replay for the game and be like, hey, what did you see? And that guy explains the call and why that call stood. There's accountability for referees in the UFL. That doesn't mean that every call is going to be perfect. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be a controversial penalty called. But if there is controversy, if there is something that goes down that's not great, there is always somebody to explain to you why it happened and be accountable for that. And that is just cathartic for a lot of NFL fans, but also it gives you a lot of information, because when they're explaining or justifying why they kept the call this way, they're telling you some of the smaller nuances of a rule that might exist in the NFL that made them keep it that way. And then when you watch a game happen and you see something that you would have thought was a face mask earlier, but then you've watched the UFL, you saw that somebody explained the rule in a certain way that made you realize, oh, that's not intentional grounding. That's not a face mask, actually, even though I might have been inclined to think so. You have that aha moment. The thing that makes the UFL special is that it is a resource for football fans. It is a place where a fan can go and learn more about football. It is an opportunity to get a behind the scenes look, not just at the drama of a football game on a professional level, but of the strategy of a football game, or sometimes the lack of strategy that happens in a football game on a professional level. That is the gift of spring football. I think sometimes people get caught up in the fact that the players aren't the most popular or that you might not know all the guys there. But I don't think that's what should bring you to spring football. Big names were never going to bring you to a secondary football league. What should bring you to a secondary football league is the amount of access that you get, the amount of learning that you get to do from not an XFL, a UFL broadcast that you don't necessarily get to learn in an NFL broadcast. They expect the fans to know a little bit more about football on the broadcast. So they talk about it, break it down a little bit more. They get into some higher level concepts when they're breaking it down than they would in a traditional NFL broadcast. I think all of these things are good for you to watch. And if you're a Browns fan who loves football and wants to know more about football and have more intelligent conversations about football, it's worth it to watch the UFL. Not because you're going to find some guy that's going to be on the Browns practice squad that you liked in the spring and you're going to root for that guy to get on the roster. Like, that's always fun, obviously. Like, we love those preseason camp stories. But because it gives you a better idea of what Kevin Stefanski's job actually is, what Ken Dorsey's role on game day actually is, what Jim Schwartz is actually doing as a defensive coordinator. What is he calling? What is the Mike linebacker who's wearing the green dot? What is their responsibility when it comes to being on the field? These are things that are hard to glean when you're watching a traditional NFL broadcast, because that information is just not available to you in any kind of consumable way. But when you watch an XFL broadcast or a UFL broadcast and you see the games, all of that information is there. You see how a defensive coordinator gets the play call in and how that play call gets relayed to the defensive guys and who gets to make checks and who gets to move guys around and who makes a miscommunication or moves around when they're not supposed to, or maybe who does the defensive coordinator blame for a coverage mishap in the second half of a game. You get that information. You get to see what the strategy is, what these players are actually worried about during game days, instead of relying on cliches, platitudes, and things that don't really matter, that we've been told that matter because that fits the narrative that the NFL wants. You get to see that unabashed, clear view of football. If you've ever rooted your phone so you can have special permissions, if you ever jailbroke your iPhone or jailbroke your PlayStation or jailbroke your PSP so you could put Homebrew on it, if you've ever enabled administrative permissions on your Windows PC so you can tinker around with some of if you ever overclocked your PC, if you ever changed your BIOS, if you ever did any of that to get the most out of whatever it is that you own, because you're so interested in how it works that you want to see how that ticks and what makes this happen, the UFL is for you if you're like that about football. But that's my pitch. That's why I think Browns fans should watch the UFL. I know I'm watching it. I'll be tweeting about it whenever I get the chance to. But yeah, if you're a fan of football, you don't got to watch the whole season. But I would always check in, watch a game, and just see those things that I mentioned and get that access and see how you can get all of this information and how that might change how you view a game and how that might change how you view things that the Browns do on Sundays. That's why I like watching the UFL. But let me know what you think about it in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.